English Language A-Level video with me, Paul, from the QE here in Darlington. Now this little video is a bridging video. It's an introduction to one of the lessons that we do for the A-Level English Language course, and it's about the power of persuasion. An important idea on the course, not least because you complete an NEA, a coursework piece on original writing, where you get to write a script or to produce an article in which you are persuading your audience over to your point of view. And also in the exam, you get to be persuasive too, because in your paper 2, section B, question 4, having read a couple of pieces of journalism on a linguistic topic, you then write your own opinion article. So persuasion and argument are important elements on the course. So let's start off with some wise words, some quotations about persuasion, which if you were in my class, I'd get you explaining in your own words and talking about the significance of these things. Don't raise your voice, says Desmond Tutu. Improve your argument. It's a nice quotation because what he's saying is don't rely on sort of bullying power over your audience. Instead, what you need to be doing is sort of upgrading your techniques and your skills of persuasion. One of the best ways to persuade others is with your ears, by listening to them, says Dean Rusk. That's important because you need to think of persuasion not as a monologue, but as a dialogue. Okay, so you need to be understanding where your audience is actually coming from in order to be an effective persuader. We have Bo Bennett saying a single question can be more influential than 1,000 statements. Now this I like because if you pose a question, you're making your text interactive. You're prompting your audience into a response, and therefore it can be a very effective way of being persuasive. Abraham Lincoln says, if you wish to win a person over to your ideas, first make them your friend. This is the idea that, persuading someone is about a relationship. It's interactional rather than transactional, and it's an emotional kind of topic. And then finally, people are usually more convinced by reasons they discovered themselves than by those found out by others. This is a nice one because it reminds us that we've got to give people the opportunity to work out the arguments by themselves, which is no mean trick. Okay, so some wise words about persuasion. Now, if you were in my lesson, I'd be getting you to do this, where on a post-it note, you'd be scribbling a note to persuade another student to skip the rest of college and to choose to do something else. Like, for example, what I'd be doing is getting on a bus down to Leeds and watching the last day of the England-New Zealand test match. Okay, and then I'd be getting you to be thinking, well, what kind of persuasive devices did you use? Since you are not in my classroom right now, I can't get you to do that, but what I can get you to do is to think about some of these very useful rhetorical devices. Now clearly, having been a GCSE student, you will know about a lot of rhetorical devices, but I just want to introduce some more subtle rhetorical devices here, and then we're going to listen to a bit of a speech, and hopefully by the end of this session you'll be getting down and writing and using some of these rhetorical devices. We start with anaphora. And don't get put off by the names of these things. They're often ancient Greek words. Anaphora means successive clauses beginning with the same words. So when we hear Winston Churchill saying, we shall fight them on the beaches, we shall fight them on the landing grounds, we shall fight them on the fields. Yes, you shut your eyes there and you thought Winston Churchill really was on the video there. That is anaphora. Similarly, when Martin Luther King starts all of those sentences with "I have a dream," that is anaphora. So anaphora is a good rhetorical device. The opposite of that is epistrophe. Epistrophe is where you put same clauses at the end, or rather the same words at the end of clauses. So anaphora is our first useful, subtle rhetorical device. We next have antithesis. Antithesis means contrast and juxtaposition. So these are contrasts between two opposing concepts or ideas. Listen to J.F. Kennedy, who says, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That is antithetical. So you've got contrast between two opposing concepts or ideas. And often rhetoric is full of antithesis, because what they want to show is that, life is simplified and black and white, and that is bad over there, and this is good over here. So antithesis. We then have litotes. Now, litotes is a posh word which basically is the opposite of hyperbole, and it's understatement, and you understate by negating a negative. So if I said, well, Ireland is no ordinary country, what I'm really meaning is that Ireland is a very special country. Or if I said something like, well, Messi, he's not the worst footballer in the world, I'm sort of ironically using litotes there in order to indicate that he is the best footballer in the world. So litotes is useful to use in a kind of ironic way, where you don't want to be just sort of boringly direct all of the time. Our next rhetorical device is polysyndeton. So polysyndeton is adding connectives between items in a list. Okay, and this really makes the audience sort of pause and think about each individual thing on a list. We will succeed through perseverance and determination and commitment and hard work. Okay, so by slowing it down and using, in that case, a coordinating connective and, it slows the thing down and it makes the audience think a little bit more about each individual item. That's polysyndeton. And then finally, we have euphemism, which is describing something unpleasant with indirect sort of veiled language, and various semantic fields, various areas use euphemistic language to sort of veil and hide the horrible truth. Think about the military, for example. They might put out a statement saying, unfortunately, the operation resulted in collateral damage. Collateral damage meaning there that civilians got killed. Euphemistic language. And the opposite of that, of course, is dysphemism. So dysphemistic language is using very blunt language. Okay, so we've got some useful, quite subtle rhetorical devices there: anaphora, antithesis, litotes, polysyndeton, and euphemism. So can you link the rhetorical device there to the statement below? We need to choose between stagnation and progression. Think about the benefits of jobs and the local economy and investment and morale. The issue is not without its difficulties. Following a restructuring program, the company workforce has been streamlined. We need more resources. We need better training. We need management that responds flexibly to the changing environment. Okay, have you been able to connect them? Well, we need to choose between stagnation and progression is clearly a use of antithesis, where you've got these two abstract nouns that are juxtaposed. Think about the benefits of jobs and local economy and investment and morale. That is polysyndeton, where the use of the coordinating connected and between those items makes the reader slow down and think about each one. The issue is not without its difficulties. It's the opposite of hyperbole. It means that the issue is hard, it's got some problems, and therefore we've got litotes here, where we've got a negative being negated, not without. Following a restructuring program, the company workforce has been streamlined. Well, this is a great example of euphemistic language. The world of business is full of them. What it really means is that people have been fired. And then finally, we need more resources. We need better training. We need management that responds flexibly, etc. That's a good example of anaphora, where you've got the same words being used at the beginnings of clauses. Okay, so hopefully you've got in your mind there those rhetorical devices. Obviously, there'll be some other devices that you will probably be familiar with as a GCSE student. You've got things like lists of three or triplets, as in Winston Churchill's blood, sweat and tears. We have metaphor. Even the most basic of speech writers, like, for example, Donald Trump, can come up with a metaphor here: drain the swamp, meaning get rid of the corruption in Washington, D.C. We have alliteration, which is a phonological pattern. It's basically the repetition of sounds at the starts of words. the finest fighting force the world has ever known. That's what Barack Obama in 2009 described the US military as being. We have hyperbole. English language A level is the greatest course in the world, which is of course true, but it's hyperbolic because we've got the use of that superlative pre-modifying adjective, greatest. And we've got abstract nouns like peace and love, abstract nouns. We have repetition, like when Tony Blair stood up in 1997 and talked about education, education, education being the top priority. And then we've got statistic. So things like the college has an unbelievable 1,000, but 100% pass rate. So the statistic there is very persuasive. Here's Emma Watson. You're going to watch part of Emma Watson's address to the UN. How does she use some persuasive devices to influence her audience? We like this because when we get students to write speeches, obviously those speeches have to be done in quite a formalized context, because most of the time people don't usually write out word for word their speech and read it. So it's only really in the most formalized contexts does that happen. So this is what's happening here, where Emma Watson is addressing the UN. So how does she use persuasive devices to influence her audience? Let's have a listen.
And now let's try. You were ambassador for UN Women 6 months ago. And the more I've spoken about feminism, the more I have realised that fighting for women's rights has too often come synonymous with man-hating. If there is one thing I know for certain, it is that this has to stop.
we pause it there. I think everybody would agree how powerful that is as a message. So the ideas are powerful, and of course the persuasive devices that go with it are powerfully delivered too. So what did you identify there? Maybe some of the subtle persuasive devices that we talked about on this video, maybe some of the more straightforward devices, maybe ones that we haven't even talked about at all. What did you detect in her speech? I'll just pull out some examples of things here. So she says, when I was 8, I was confused for being called bossy. When I was 14, I started to be sexualized by certain elements of the media. This, of course, is anaphora. So we've got the repetition of words at the beginnings of each of the sentences. And it's taking us through, it's taking us forward autobiographically through her life, showing the sorts of issues that girls and women are facing. So anaphora is a good technique that's being used in this one. Women whose expressions are seen as too strong, too aggressive, isolating, and anti-men, unattractive even. So we notice here that we have a list that's going on. Now this is not polysyndeton because we haven't got connectives being put between these post-modifying adjectives. It's a good old-fashioned list that we've got. It's not even a list of 3, it's going beyond that. So we've got that piling up of details here in that list, which in itself is a persuasive device. I think it's right that I'm paid the same as my male counterparts. I think that it's right that I should be able to make decisions about my own body. Again, this is anaphora, isn't it? With the repetition at the beginning of the sentences, using the first person singular pronoun I, and very, very sort of forthright in her opinion that she's putting forward. She's using the copular verb is, so it is right, it is right. So another good use of anaphora. And then we've got over here, my parents didn't love me less because I was born a daughter. My school didn't limit me because I was a girl. Now this, of course, is litotes, where you've got a negative being negated. Didn't love me less. A negative being negated there. Okay, so there's lots of subtlety in the arguments that are coming through there, and it makes it a very powerful speech. Okay, there are lots of other rhetorical features that in your own time you can identify on that speech. So if you were in my class now, this is what you'd be doing. You'd be writing a script for a 3-minute persuasive speech on any subject, as something to be delivered and posted on YouTube. Here are some possibilities. It could be about improving people's mental health. It might be a message to our beloved Prime Minister. It might be about building a better wherever you live. It might be an issue to do with sport, like, for example, sports washing, like the Saudi purchase of Newcastle United. It could be about part-time work wages and conditions. It could even be a more light-hearted one about, what's the greatest program that's on Netflix. So you choose your possibilities. And the main thing is that you need to be using some of these persuasive devices that we've mentioned in this lesson. So we're talking about things like alliteration, anaphora, antithesis, euphemism, hyperbole, lists of 3, litotes, metaphor, polysyndeton, repetition, statistics, and any other sorts of persuasive devices that you can think of. Right, how are you going to start it? Well, here's an example of how you shouldn't start your speech. Hello, today I want to talk to you about young people's mental health. This is a topic which I feel very strongly about. The government needs to do something about this issue, which has got worse over the last 3 years. Now, it's not a terrible start, is it? There's a nice clarity to what it is, but the point about it is that it's just predictable. It's just clear and predictable rather than being sophisticated. So what you want to do is you want to try and start with something that is a bit more ambitious. Take something like this, for example. It began when my brother was in year 9. Smiler had been his nickname in the football team. But suddenly there was no smile to be seen. In fact, he gave up playing football that year, gave up the guitar he'd been learning, gave up on most of his studies. Now, this was the first time I'd come across the devastating impact of mental health issues, not just as an abstract concept. I could see that this was destroying Jack's life. Now that's a much more engaging start, isn't it? Because it's not so predictable as that first one over there. It goes into personal anecdote, and it gives us something that we can all relate to, having all been at school and come across people who have had, experience of mental health issues. Okay, so hopefully in you be getting on and doing that. That gives you a bit of a flavour of the sort of persuasive topic that we will be doing in an A-level lesson, getting you prepared for doing your piece of coursework or your Paper 2 Section B opinion article. Thank you for listening. I hope that's been useful for you. Thank you.